There are three things that I know about storytelling that I would love for you to leave here with today. The first is something that you probably know in your heart, which is that children have these amazingly rich imaginations and these deep fantasy lives, and stories give them access to these inner lives. The second thing that I'd like you to know is that there are all these amazing people out there that have dedicated their lives to writing. People that spend kind of ridiculous numbers of hours in this kind of monkish isolation, taking risks on the page. And I, for one, am really grateful to those people because they've shown me the possibilities for writing. The third thing is that when you get this magical alchemy of this living writer teaching this child, there's the potential for transformation. Lives can be changed by storytelling. My life was changed by storytelling. I grew up about an hour north of here in a small town called Woolwich on the Kennebec River. I was living in this farmhouse, and we had these crazy sheep out back that used to get out and chase me around the house. I took this 1-hour bus ride to school every day, and on that bus, I did a lot of singing to Casey Kasem in the top 40, and I also did a whole lot of daydreaming. I was that child with the face pressed to the glass. And I walked into 7th grade, and there was Mr. Hatch in our tiny school in the woods, and he had this booming voice, and he said, "Conley, today we are writing stories." And he said, "Put away the grammar books." We'd been diagramming sentences all week. He said, "We're going to write fiction, and you can write anything you want." And I couldn't believe my good luck. I couldn't believe that Mr. Hatch was taking time out of the day for us to write stories. And not only was he giving us permission to write, but he was taking it really seriously. He was making it seem like the most natural thing in the world. And here was a place for those daydreams that I'd been having on the bus. When I was 13, I got this turntable for my birthday, and I raided my parents' album collection. It was a pretty good collection, and I took the one with the guy with the scraggly beard and the black leather jacket, and it said, "Born to Run." And I went upstairs, put the enormous headphones on, and cranked that music up really loudly, and then I read the lyrics, and I devoured them, like I was reading Springsteen's diary. Here, he was writing about these whacked-out characters in these gritty cities. One of the openings went, the Rangers had a homecoming in Harlem late last night, and the Magic Rat drove his sleek machine over the Jersey state line. So I'm living in Woolwich, Maine, down this long dirt driveway, and I want to know this guy named Rat. I want to be in that car. And I can't believe that this is storytelling. So if this is storytelling, then I'm in. More please. And I know we've all probably been moved by the power of rock and roll, but I tell you, I read the lyrics and I was in his story. I got to 11th grade and I got to write really bad confessional free verse poetry. Narratives about walking at night with my boyfriend and looking at the North Star. But the great thing was I had this wild poet for a teacher, Mr. Smith, Bruce Smith. He wore one-piece black jumpsuits with zippers down the front, and he went on monthly juice fasts. And he said, "Poetry will change your life." And I believed him. I was sold. He said, "Poetry will say all that is unsayable in the world." And I nodded my head. And he saw us, and he heard us, and we worked harder for that. Now, flash forward about 25 years, and I've gotten this poetry degree out in California, and I am, by some definitions now, a writer. And I find myself back in Maine at the Long Creek Youth Prison. I'm teaching a poetry workshop there, just across the river. And there are all kinds of rules in there. The chairs are bolted to the floor so that the kids can't throw them, and the pens that I go in with, I have to leave with so no one uses them as a weapon. And on this night, I blow it. I bring in contraband. I sit on the rug in the library with the boys, and out comes this sea glass I've brought, and these mussel shells, and these maple leaves, and the librarian starts freaking out. She thinks that the boys are going to use some of this stuff as a weapon themselves. There'd been a big fight in the jail the night before, and a lot of the kids in the fight are in my class. So she starts gesticulating madly behind the boys for me to shut the workshop down. But I don't really understand what she's saying, so I simply offer them a writing prompt. I say, "Where are you from?" And then I ask them to take one of the objects that I've brought in with them and leave the jail in their mind and go back in time. And the boys write, and they take great pride in their work that night. And then Michael goes, and he reads a poem called the Maine Love Song Poem. And in it, he's used one of those seashells, and he's talked about his girlfriend in high school. And we listen, and we're all transported. And when he's done, he says, "I'm just waiting for a magic carpet ride out of this place." And I leave Long Creek that night, and I'm thinking hard about Michael. I'd been thinking about Michael for a while. And I'm wondering, where can we start a writing center in Portland that would teach kids the magic of story before they get in trouble? As good luck would have it, I had lunch that week with my old friends Mike Paternity and Sarah Corbett. They had both published these amazing nonfiction books, and they were both award-winning journalists. They were amazing people, some of the best writers I knew, and we had telepathy at that lunch. We were all imagining the same writing center. One of us said, "Let's make it a guerrilla writing lab where kids can write anything they want." And someone else said, "Let's let them write in the company of working writers every day." And one of us said, "Let's make it just for kids and about kids and only in the language of kids." And I remember as I left, I said, "I'll go look at rents." But then something good happened. We didn't get a lease that year. The telling room was born, but we had no students. What we did is we farmed ourselves out to the Portland schools, and we showed up at all the great teachers' rooms in this city, and we said, "How can we help you? What kind of writing do you need?" The first workshop that we ever did was an after-school gig at Deering High Fiction, and we smothered that school in flyers, and we had 5 kids show up. 5 seemed like a pretty decent start. And I remember sitting around that room with those kids, and I said, "It doesn't matter what you're writing here today. You could write hip-hop or poetry, or you could start your novella. All that really matters is that you're generating material." I still believe that very much today. It's all about getting the idea down on the page. And I said, "Tell us a story. We are listening." We taught workshops to over 2,000 kids this year, workshops on wharf kitties and superheroes and the food that our grandmothers cooked for us when we were young. Here's a multimedia workshop we did this winter where we asked kids to draw maps of their neighborhoods and then to hone in on those maps and write a story about a place in that neighborhood that really mattered to them. This is Oliver, and he moved up to Maine a few years ago to a fixer-upper in Portland. He wrote this fantastic piece called "My House is a Rotting Snake Pit." And in it, he traces the snake that lodges itself in the wall of his house, and then he uses that snake as the basis for a long argument with his mom about why they should move. When Oliver read the piece to all the families that came to the workshop on the last day, he did an amazing job, and people were in stitches at his intro. But if you listen to Oliver, he has a significant speech impediment. So significant, in fact, that his father was deeply moved to hear him read. He'd never heard him read like that before. So here was a kid struggling to find that speaking voice, and now he was telling his story. I met Jackson when he was in high school. We were doing a story house project, 15 Maine high school kids from other countries and 15 Maine writers, working all year to hone these kids coming to America stories. And the Maine College of Art collaborated with us. Their class for social action built houses for these stories, places for these stories to live out of wood and nails. Well, Jackson, as you might be able to tell, has a penetrating stare. And he looked at me that first day in his library, and he said, so really, why are you here? He said, "No, really, what is in this for you?" And I thought, man, why am I here? What is in this for me, truthfully? And what I said to Jackson was, I'm a teacher, and I am here to help you write a story, and the payoff for me is I get to listen to you tell it. But really, I think what I was there for is, and I think what many teaching writers are there for, is is the magic that we think might go down. I was waiting for him to kind of leave the building and begin to engage with himself. And I did this thing where I said, Jackson, you've got 25 minutes. Tell me about the last day you were in Sudan. Go. And then he wrote. I'd learned by then that teenagers love to be timed, and they love that beginning, middle, and end. And he wrote, and he landed on this great image of the JFK airport when he touched down from Sudan. And he said that it was like this crazy soccer arena, and he'd never seen more white people in a room in his life. And he was so scared that he sat down right in the terminal. And I did some stealth teaching with him that day. I gave him that time, and then what I did when he was done is I gave him immediate feedback in the form of praise. And then I said something that I always say, which is, there's no wrong way to do this writing thing. And then the last thing I said was, write with your heart. Just put your heart in there. Now, it sounds really easy. I say it a lot. But on that day, I still didn't know what it meant. In fact, it's really, really hard to write with your heart, harder than I even knew. In 2007, my husband and I moved to Beijing, China, with our 2 kids for close to 3 years. I had this idea that I would write a book while I was there about our family. In the spring of that year, I discovered that I had breast cancer. It was not in the plan. And I had this zooey surgery in Beijing in a hospital where everyone was talking in Mandarin, and I couldn't really understand what was going on. And then we left for a while, and we came back to the States, and I had another surgery here in the States. And when I woke up from that second surgery, a dear friend was in the room, and she was a novelist, and she was holding this writing journal, and she said, Susan, you might want to write down some of this cancer stuff. It might help you to make sense of it. And I nodded politely, and then I put that journal as far away from me as I could, because I didn't want to write any of it down. I didn't want to remember anything about the disease. I finished treatment, and we went back to Beijing to live, and it was there that I sunk right into a post-cancer slump, total post-treatment funk, and I couldn't climb my way out. And one day I opened that writing journal that my friend had given me, and I couldn't help but have written some notes in there, because people do say the craziest things to you when you're a young mother with cancer. They're trying to be helpful, so maybe a doctor says something like this: the statistics show that you probably will be alive when your kids graduate from high school. And you look at them and you want to scream. And you think, high school? I'm planning on a lot longer than high school. So instead of screaming, what I did is I wrote it down in the writing journal. So I'm in Beijing and I'm stuck, and I open that journal and I realize as I'm reading that I have that book in there that I want to write, but only if I dare to access the material. Only if I do that thing I was telling Jackson to do, where I write with my heart. So I try it. I write a chapter where my 4-year-old, Aiden, comes to me the day of that second surgery, and out of the blue, he hands me a drawing he's made of pink butterflies on purple construction paper, and he says, Mommy, when you're in the surgery, I want you to imagine you're one of these butterflies, and then you can just get up and fly away. He says it to me really seriously, and he looks me in the eye to make sure I've got it. He says, so when it hurts, you just get up and fly away. And then I try a chapter where I tell the boys that I have cancer, and that was at dinner, and they were 4 and 6, and they were eating their mac and cheese, and I told them, and they paused, and then one of them said with alarm, so are you going to die? And I said, no, I'm not going to die. And then they recalibrated, and they said, okay, so what's for dinner? What's for dessert? And then they said, by the way, do you know Michelle Obama? It was election year. So I wrote that book, and I wrote myself out of cancer. And what I think I did is I wrote myself into being a writer. And I used my heart, and I realized that what I had been asking Jackson and those kids to do was a lot harder than I imagined. There's a lot of good research out there about the power of storytelling, and this number 15 is being used, 15 minutes. If kids can just get 15 minutes of writing time, then lots of great things happen. They graduate from high school. They go to college. They keep jobs. And more interestingly, perhaps, is they're seeing that kids, particularly from war-torn countries and from hard homes, have something we're calling emotional resiliency. We tend to call it emotional literacy, actually. And I think it's that ability for the kids to say what they mean, to say who they are. And I think it distills education down to its most simple level. It's such a simple idea. This is the Young Writers and Leaders crew, and these are 15 English language learners, refugee and immigrant kids here in Portland, and we work with them all year long. They are matched with 15 mentors from the community, and they write stories, they do all kinds of homework and community projects, and also they work on getting into college. I wanted you to see Edna. Edna will be the first girl to go through all 4 years of the Young Writers and Leaders Project. And in one of the workshops, we asked her to write about someone who mattered a whole lot to her. And she chose her uncle, and I just wanted to read a tiny bit of it. This is about her uncle. He likes to chew gum, but he doesn't smoke. I guess his favorite drink is coffee because I've never seen him put it down. My uncle and I talk about food a lot, ironically enough, in Ramadan, because I know it makes him angry. And I tell him I'll only stop if he takes me out for dinner, and then he does. So this book is one of these anthologies that we put out every year. It's a collection of all of our kids' writing, and I think in all of these books, we are able to answer that huge teenage angst question for the kids, which is, who am I? And then another one gets answered in there, which is, do I matter? We have taught we've taught in over 20 towns and 35 schools, and we are hungry for more. We can imagine a state where kids are getting more, a lot more than that 15 minutes. We believe in the power of story to change lives. We believe that story offers permission to access that inner life and the hope and the fear and the passion. And we believe it creates this connectivity. So it changes a student's life, and we see that all the time. And then it changes perhaps a school community, and then it changes a town and a city and so on. I think if we understand the power of story at its simplest level, then we might begin to help kids understand their place in the world. I thought I'd leave you here with a writing prompt. I'm going to ask you to ask yourselves why you have come here today. And I'm going to give you this one prompt. It's a big white postcard I want you to imagine in your head. So I'm giving you 20 minutes. Tell us in great detail why you have come here today. And when we ask you to read your story out loud, we will all be listening. We will be leaning in closer because we all love a good story. And we will be saying, tell us more. Thank you very much.